China is a difficult case for us from an ethical point of view because, as Ian said, we believe we have values which are ethically superior, and we would like a country that's a big leader in the global economy to associate some of those values, not just for the purpose of the institutions that I spoke about earlier, but simply because we think it would be a good thing for the world because of the influence that they wield. What I wonder is the following. Does China have to decline in importance to start playing ball? Because I think that's what's going to happen. If you look at China's growth right now, it's relying heavily on two trends that propelled growth in the US and Japan. First, a rural to urban migration. Rural to urban migration tracks extremely well with growth in the United States in the 20th century and Japan in the 20th century. Second, copying technologies, reverse engineering, and producing things more cheaply. We know that this was a great force in Japan's growth as well. But what happened in the US and Japan? Eventually, after growing really fast, they slowed down into a nice glide path until they hit a stable long-term growth pattern. Now, we saw that in Japan, stable long-term growth is not as high as in the US. And we think that some of the reasons for that are that their basic institutions, their markets, their legal protections, how they treat investors, the ability to innovate and be entrepreneurial is not as good in Japan, or are not as good as they are in the United States. So, or at least not as favorable for economic growth. So what does this mean for China? I think the same thing's going to happen. They're going to slow down as those two trends run out of steam, and they're going to settle into that steady long-term growth path, and their average growth rate is going to be lower than the average growth rate of the US at that point, just the way Japan's was. What does that mean? The US is going to start catching up again after China passes, because the US is going to be growing faster. They'll close the gap, and the US is never going to look back after that. Because our institutions, for the purposes of economic growth, I firmly believe are superior. The ones in China that will hold them back have roots that are thousands of years old, like Confucian philosophy, which sets up these arcane hierarchies in business, where it's very hard for ideas to percolate up from the bottom and innovation to occur. Are they going to ditch those? Not necessarily. This is really ingrained in Chinese culture, and it can be useful for creating trust in a system where trust is hard to come by, like the Chinese system today, which is so rank with corruption. But in a free market economy, not so useful anymore. All right, so I wonder, does that decline have to happen, which I think is going to happen probably 2 or 3 decades from now, in order for China to start playing more of a cooperative role? We'll see.